The episode is coming at you in just a moment. Just wanted to take a second to thank Podfest Berlin. This episode was recorded live at Podfest Berlin, which is supported by Wonder Tax returns made easy. So if you're looking to do your tax returns, check out Wonder Tax. Thank you very much to Podfest Berlin. And as always, if you can leave a comment, if you can give us feedback, leave a review, that helps us very much. Thank you. Enjoy the episode. Welcome back to Unsigned Berlin. This is a special episode we're recording at Podfest Berlin. It's live. We'll probably edit, for example, like where we put the audio snippet in, but we're going to thank Podfest Berlin for giving us the platform. And yeah, without further ado, we'll get to it. I'm sat with Ethan of The Usual Boys. This is your second appearance on the podcast. The last one was, I think, in spring. It was a while ago
now, yeah.
And maybe we can get going as usual with a little snippet, and we'll play a short track of the most recent single. Yeah, and that's a little bit of I Want What You Have by The Usual Boys. This is part of a new album which will be coming out in April as planned. Was there anything moving on from the last, like, you had a group of singles early in the year and then like kind of spread throughout the last couple years, and then this is like the first full project that has like a really long, well, it's like 6 months or so, I think, of planning. Was there anything moving on from those singles where you're like, this is something we have to change and we're going to try to do differently for this fully planned project?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose all of our music before was quite sort of sporadic. We've always just recorded stuff any way we could, getting some little studio time here, or like our EP that we put out, I guess, just as the pandemic was starting in 2020. That was just recorded in our friend's dad's attic,
right,
on on tape with 8 tracks. So this is the first thing that we've done that we've kind of had sort of that autonomy over. Yeah. And I think that is a blessing and a curse, because it meant that we had full control over everything that we were able to do, and ultimate amount of layering and overdubs. But also, if you don't have someone over your shoulder kind of say, like, tapping their watch, it can take forever as well. So I think now maybe it's taken a bit longer than we'd all have hoped, but it's just because we just really wanted to kind of get it right this time. And all of the other songs we've recorded have been recorded in like max 1 day.
Right.
So this has been really fun to be able to like give every song that we kind of feel like the time it deserves, and try and replicate something that feels a bit more like we envisage rather than just what we're able to capture. Yeah. If that makes sense.
With that, like trying to get everyone on track, and with any group project, but especially with bands, like trying to get things on schedule, make sure everyone's doing things like do this by this time so that the next thing can happen. Have you had any ways that you found that really work in terms of getting that process going?
I mean, I don't think we're in any space to offer advice.
Yeah,
because it's been such a grueling process, and we all live, like we don't really have a leader as such. Yeah. So it's a very kind of slow, democratic process trying to do everything. But I mean, in that way, I think that's why it's also been kind of rewarding as well. And I think, it's always the first time you build a big project like this, you learn all of the things not to do. And so I feel like when we go into album 2, I think we're a bit like weathered now and more prepared. Yeah. And we did it in such a crazy way. Like, we recorded all of the drums in one building, recorded the guitars in a different building, then the bass, or then the vocals and then the bass, and then overdubbing, all in different places, because we kept moving and being kicked out of our studios and stuff. So yeah, it was really odd. I think what really helped us though was even though Rasmus, our producer bass player, pretty much mixed everything himself, we still took it to be mixed at a analog studio called Big Snuff in Weissensee, with a really good producer, Nene, and having that deadline that we had to have everything pre-mixed, all the overdubs ready, so he could do a final mix and then a master was so good for us because it kind of whipped us into shape a bit.
Kind of gave it deadline.
Yeah.
And maybe for the next project you'll be able to get a manager or someone like that, or even just like someone on social media or something like that.
I mean,
right?
if there's a manager out there willing to take us on, we would love that help, because we always have to kind of self-manage.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can, cause a bit of I wouldn't say conflict, but maybe like friction between us.
Yeah.
Because we're always having to kind of manage each other, and keep on top of each other and keep each other accountable. So if there was some sort of third party doing that, I think that would be very liberating.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to remove that like pressure and scheduling and deadlining from the social dynamic of the band a little bit.
Yeah.
I have the same with doing this podcast where it's like the person always has to be like, oh, deadline is this, and it just feels shitty where it's like I'm also part of the creating team, so it's like it's a weird dynamic to have to handle.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose though also in some way that's like one way we're able to keep this project going is because it's so autonomous. Because you kind of see that now. I have people I know and people I've worked with who are in more kind of traditional music making situations where they have management teams and distributors and people doing their merch and people doing their product. And so by the end of it, they have this tiny little piece of the pie left over for themselves, like 18%, sometimes even less, so 10%. So you need to be making an extraordinary amount of money
to justify that,
to have any money for yourself. Because we make very little money, but there's no one working with us. So we get to keep it all. We make all of our own merch, all of our own management, all of our social media assets, everything. So in some ways it's a slog, but in other ways it kind of feels like this is actually a bit more of a sustainable model to make music. Yeah. Because I think actually most managers these days take like 10-20%. Yeah. Which can be more than each band member if you're in a band of 5 people.
Yeah. Yeah, true. Where is the like biggest portion of income coming from? Is it usually live shows? It can't be streaming.
No, it's not. Merch.
Merch. Okay, nice.
Definitely merch. Recently, I think like that's also a model we're kind of flirting with a little bit, is to try and keep tickets prices low as we can, to get as many folk in, because it's tricky if you have to spend €25 just to go see a band. Yeah, it shouldn't be a lot of money, but it feels like a lot of money because we're so used to being able to go to things for free, especially in Berlin. There's so much competition. But that's a bit of a model I think we're toying with a little bit, is to keep a ticket price quite low so anybody can come along and see us. And then if we really wow you at the show and you want to support us, you can buy a T-shirt, and we keep 100% of that. Nice payment. We don't have to
do merch cuts.
Do merch cuts or something like that. So that's quite a good model I think for us recently, that we can double or triple the amount we take from the show by selling merch. Nice.
And that's also like you guys have a pretty, at least last time I was at one of your shows, you have a pretty wide variety of like price ranges for merch, because you have the lighters that are like, I don't know, $250 or something. Yeah. And then I think you had CDs and stuff, and then
sets and I mean, Alexi's been pretty good at finding all of these cassettes and CDs basically for free on eBay Kleinanzeigen. And we've been able to like tape over them or write the CDs, and we printed all ourselves, cut it out. It's very DIY, but it means then that we can selling these little silly cassettes can be, or T-shirts has been the most profitable thing, but all of these little things are a good way for us to get a bit of extra income.
Yeah, I guess T-shirts are also like a different thing for the person that's buying it, because then you get, cassettes you get something, but if I ever buy a cassette or a CD from a band, it's because I'm trying to support the like band. Like I'm never going to use it. And with a T-shirt, you're like, oh, I also have a T-shirt and I'm needing one,
Yeah. And I think it's also that it's a nice, all of these things are, if you make a nice object as well, It's a nice double thing if someone gets to support a band they like, and they also get this nice object to own as well. So it doesn't feel too tokenistic.
And for you, it's kind of like marketing on some level as well. Where if it's like on a hoodie, people see the name around, and
I mean, that was our idea for the lighters. It's like they're like the most stolen object, you know. So you can, if you sell 500 lighters, you don't know where they're all going to end up and be this little moving piece of promotion.
Yeah, and it says like, "I hate the Usual Boys." And people are like, "Who are the Usual Boys?"
Yeah, and then in the back there's the QR code to our Spotify. So no matter where it ends up, you know. It might be
was that the same system when you did your UK tour this summer with merch cuts, where you could still keep everything, or was it different?
Yeah, I mean, I think no venue we played at even brought up the idea of having a merch cut.
Nice.
So yeah, that was great.
What's the kind of booking process, and how is it different here in Berlin or in Germany compared to the UK?
I mean, I think, to be honest, I was very surprised because, I mean, I'm from Scotland, so I thought I knew a bit about the industry over there, and I thought it would be worse than Germany.
Right.
But actually, I have to say, most of the venues, the deals were a lot better over there.
Okay.
They were much cheaper to rent, if we even had to rent them. Some of them just paid us a fee. Yeah, because I find honestly in Berlin, maybe it's this thing that there's just so much competition, but I find that the venues are really ludicrously expensive to rent. Sometimes, you know, like well-known venues, you pay 700-800, then you also have to, for some reason, pay for the security and door person yourself before you've, you know, anything.
Yeah.
And you're basically bringing people to their bar to buy drinks. And on top of that, renting the whole place. I find it bizarre, to be honest. So actually in the UK, it was a bit easier. We didn't have to bring such big crowds to be able to still cover all our costs and be able to share what was left over with the support bands.
Nice.
And yeah, on top of that, selling the merch meant that we could also pay for more or less cover the cost of our flights and stuff, all the travel internally in the UK.
Did you guys have to get, I mean, obviously not you, but other band members getting like working visas for doing that?
Well,
okay, yeah. No, I mean, it's a fucking disaster after Brexit anyway, so like.
I mean, I hope the HMSRC
they've got other things to deal with.
Yeah, but we basically made sure, from what we could understand about touring in the UK, you don't necessarily have to have the visa, but you have to be able to have all of the documents that you would need to have a visa.
Right.
So we made sure we had all of that.
Yeah.
But to be honest, we also, Patrick and I, who are UK, we have British passports.
Yeah.
We took all the musical instruments, and the other guys just took suitcases and said they were going on holiday. So also no questions asked.
Yeah.
It was, I mean, also the implications of, we had a suitcase filled with T-shirts with our band name on it that I think could have been a bit like, do we have to declare this? I don't know, but yeah. So
it's also like how much profit you're really making from the tour, where like the UK is gonna care about it that much.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah,
it's
for
like,
sure.
It's not something to worry about so much.
But we did. I would say, if you want some advice, you can text me, because we have all of the templates for all of the forms and everything like that.
Oh, okay, nice.
Yeah, we did quite a bit of research on that, just because we so didn't want all of this planning and money we'd spent to be ruined by bureaucracy. So I think, to be honest, if you're going over there with a van, it's actually trickier, because you have all your instruments in the van and all of this stuff, and it looks very much like an enterprise coming into the UK. Yeah. If you fly over and you can rent all the stuff over there, then it's going to be a lot easier, I would say.
Yeah. And then were you taking trains between locations, or?
Actually buses, megabus.
Damn.
It was really like a DIY tour, but it was such a laugh as well, because we all get on really well, and we had an Airbnb we stayed in Glasgow, and then we had the venue in Edinburgh had its own flat.
Nice.
And then
nice?
No, not nice. But that also added to the fun of it. Like all three of us sharing a bed, and then Rasmus had his own bed, and like the oven, when you switched it on, it was so dirty that this plume of black smoke came out anytime you tried to make anything. But all of that, I think, just adds to the fun of it all. Like in Leeds, we were really lucky we could stay with Patrick's big brother.
Right.
So that was like the luxury night. And then in Brighton, we were crashing on friends' couches, and then the same in London. So,
yeah. Did you feel like there was a difference between the way that venues did their booking system in the south versus the north? Because I feel like in the north is maybe more of a cultural support for bands and that kind of thing.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe. I mean, one of the best deals we had was in London. Okay. Which surprised me.
Yeah, same.
Really cool company called Jaguar Shoes Collective, I think it's called. So they have 2 venues in London. So I think actually we're going to do, when we release the album, we'll do a show here in Berlin and also a show with them in London too. Because they looked after us really well and the show was packed. They have a really good promo circuit, so we didn't really have to do much promo at all, and the venue was completely full.
Nice.
So yeah, that was fantastic.
For the other stuff, what you were doing promo, was it mostly like social media, paid ads, or did you trying to get people kind of on the ground in the cities?
I mean, it was just like all hands on deck. Like, because I'm being from Scotland, I knew people up there, and then Pat knew a lot of people in the south. So we were just trying to pull all of our friends, family. We also were doing paid targeted ads, writing to local music publications, stuff like that. So it was like, all bit DIY, but it was a collective effort. Yeah.
Were there any signifiers for the band where you started to think like, okay, a tour doing this many locations is an option?
I think the UK one just seemed to make sense, first of all, just because we had people that we knew there. I think now we would like to do a sort of similar thing also in like Scandinavia, because we have, or the Nordic countries, I should say, because our singer's Finnish and our bass player's Swedish, so that could be like we could do a similar sort of thing, I think.
Right.
I think also just the UK music scene is maybe more conducive to the sort of music we make.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And we get like played there a bit. It's like other than Berlin, all of our sort of top spots are in the UK. So, and I think, it feels like in the future it would be a good place for us to try and focus on. Yeah. So that was kind of why we went down that route, I would say.
Nice. Is there something you wish you had known from before doing the tour, where you're like, either for you guys for next time or before someone does their first UK tour, what your advice would be?
I would probably just say like, we were not like crazy ambitious because we did 5 shows, but even that,
it's a lot.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And I think like, just because you're going over to the UK, you don't need to like go mental and do like 10 shows. Just do like 2, because it's so stressful.
Right.
Going to cities that you've no one in, trying to like fill a venue. It's that was a lot of stress. I think now I would just like to know that it all went well, because before we were leaving, I was like so nervous about that. We'll have nobody at any of the shows. We'll lose loads of money. It's going to be a disaster. But actually, it was a great laugh, and I'm so happy we did it.
Nice. Was there one person in the band that you were kind of like that took on the role of tour manager, or was it the usual kind of boys?
I think like in Scotland, I was maybe like just took a bit more control, just because I'm from there. Yeah. And then Alexi had booked the London show, and Pat knew about Brighton and Leeds. So I think we were all just pitching in as we usually do, and it was a good laugh. But there was no like tour manager.
Someone in charge.
Yeah.
In terms of like, a lot of things have changed. You started the last EP came out 2020, where everything was shut down. You couldn't do anything basically. To now, do you feel like there's opportunities that have surfaced now that maybe didn't exist before COVID, even in this touring sense of like, because there's fewer bands performing in this little pocket of time between right after COVID, a bunch of people were performing. Anything like that comes to mind?
To be honest, I think no. I think the opportunity that's come around is the opportunity of not being given any opportunities. And it's made us more resilient and maybe not waiting for this unknown to come and swoop us into success, and really taught us that if we're to have any success, it's just through a grind.
Right.
And I think accepting that has been somewhat difficult, but also somewhat liberating.
It's similar to the terrible rehearsal space you were in last time that we talked, where you were like, this is kind of motivating us to get out.
Yeah. And I think also it's like when you're younger, maybe you feel like the music industry is just so massive and that you need someone to come along and like discover you.
Yeah.
And I think I believed that would happen up until like last year. And then now I think nobody's going to discover us. It's just going to be this like micro improvements.
Yeah.
And where we get to is where we get to, and that's fine.
Have you guys kind of made a decision to stay independent, or are you still actively reaching out to people to scoop you up?
I mean, we're not reaching out to anybody. No.
Great.
If someone came along and offered us a good deal, I would go for it. Because I think that's the problem when you're doing it all yourself. Is like there's so much to do that actually music making is quite a small part of it. And I wish that's the thing I'm more interested in, is making music and making art than organizing logistics and promotion and stuff like that. But it would have to be a good deal, because I also know what this is worth at some point as well. And I think it's quite brazen when people come along and, you know, do a bit of promo that they don't really tell you what they've done, and then they take 25% of everything you've made. So they would need to offer a good deal, I think, for me to go for it. Yeah.
What would a good deal look like for you guys, or for you personally?
I mean, I wouldn't accept anything less than, you know, like a 50-50 indie deal with a label. And I think I would have to see that they were really putting something into it.
Yeah.
Because we've had a deal in the past that was also a 50-50 indie. And to be honest, I don't think they did anything to promote the music or distribute it, really.
Yeah.
We got written about in one magazine and that was it. And then they have the rights to 50% of that music for the rest of time.
Oh, damn.
So it's like, I don't know. I think it's, I would really need to see that the label was really on, you know, on their shit and doing cool stuff, and that they were passionate about the music, and we weren't just, you know, a bit of their portfolio that's on the back burner.
Yeah, where it's like it's more beneficial to sign a bunch of artists, and then if one of them blows up, you have them, and then just don't care about the rest.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's really how I felt with the last deal.
Yeah, it's a shame. And it's also, there's a weird thing with, especially with press coverage, where a lot of magazines or podcasts or press outlets charge the artists or charge whoever's paying the label. So if you're paying someone who's like I don't think PR is the right role, but someone whose like job it is to get you into publishing, publishments. Anyway, press. That a lot of them will charge a flat rate and then be like, okay, well, we can't guarantee anything. Or the other option is you have to pay to get into these, like into Rolling Stone or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, it's a total racket. Everybody's making money except the people making music. Which is the whole point of the enterprise. Yeah. And you kind of, at some point, it's really hard for me not to get angry about it. Because you put so much work into it, and then there's these little characters who are like, I'll write about you in my blog if you pay me $50. And you're like, who are you? And you don't even contact these people. When you'll know if you make music, your email is flooded with people asking you for money. Yeah.
And Spotify, like social media and Spotify are the ones that get the worst, where it's like playlisting, like, oh, just pay this amount of money and we'll put you in a playlist, which is not allowed. And your account can get banned from Spotify if you do that. And then, like, as in, if you pay someone and then they kind of recognize it's spotted streams or whatever. Or people on Instagram, I get, like, every day some person being like a massive price list. It's almost like in the telegrams for drugs, where it's like emojis and stuff, and then like a price, and it's like, we'll give you like fame, and you're like, okay, sure. Yeah.
But on the other hand, you also have super nice people. Like, we just DM random people sometimes. We have nice playlists that we like, and they're always like, yeah, sure. Yeah, of course, I'll put you in. Great track. So you have this weird balance of people who are genuinely into music, who make the whole thing go round, and then you have all these other leeches who are just trying to make money off other people's work.
Yeah.
And I guess, now I'm a bit more long in the tooth with this whole thing. I just want to avoid the latter and stick with the former.
What's your experience been like with playlisting? And if it's pitching through Spotify or people with like personal public playlists?
I think we do much better with personal playlists. We were in one editorial Spotify thing once.
Right.
But I just don't know how all of that works.
It's a bit it's a bit of a black box where it's like you do the pitching, and then if you get something, then there's the ranking of like how high up on the playlist you are, because a lot of people just go on playlists and click play, and then it's like direct through. So if you're at the end, you're not getting anything anyway.
And I think also we put too much value on these things. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, that's also something that I think about. Is like, ultimately, I just want people to enjoy the music. And I think if people really enjoy the track, and not that many people listen to it, but the people who do really enjoy it, that's more meaningful for me than having like a lot of passive listening. Yeah. And also with this thing of trying to get loads and loads of Spotify streams, like, for what? Ultimately, you don't make any money on Spotify.
So you get 1,000, you're like, oh, €3.
Yeah, so in some way, it's like, if I'd rather just people are listening to it, and if it's on Spotify, if it's on YouTube, if they're ripping it off somewhere, it's all the same to me, to be honest. So yeah, if you enjoy the music, then that's grand. That's what.
Is there anything that you're looking forward to for? Well, actually, how close? You have this full rollout for the album planned. Is the album finished at this point, and now it's like maybe mastering and stuff like that, and then putting together all the visuals and all of the extra stuff?
Yeah, so it's finished. Yeah, and now what we would like to do is, because it's taken so long and it's our baby, we are actually soon going to start a Kickstarter to try and print it on vinyl.
Oh, cool.
So we've been working with a really cool photographer we know from Italy, Anna Michelotti, working on some of the album artwork.
Nice.
And then I think, we're going to try and start our Kickstarter in December. Because if we can sell, I think it was 100 copies, right, then we can print 300 copies, if that makes sense. So if we sell 100 on Kickstarter, then that'll make us enough money to print 300. So then we have another 200 that we can sell at shows and stuff. Nice. So that's our next big project. And I think that would be really exciting to have it. I think something also as a validation of all the work that's gone into it, to have this sort of physical object, cool, that represents. And it's been so many years of our life, this band, so far. And I think this first album is, it's kind of like a summation of a lot of work. So it'd be lovely to have it like in a physical form. Yeah.
Have the songs you've been writing for the album been written over these past few years, or has it mostly been like in the last 6 months where there was more of a concept maybe, or a drive?
I think it's been, like the last 6 months has all been just finishing the recordings. Like, it's been, I think, in motion since about 2020, to be honest. Right. And I think a lot of the music is very much and has this sort of autumnal feeling of something coming to an end and not knowing what's happening. And I guess we were on this sort of trajectory before COVID. We had possibly we were even going to play Glastonbury, and then it all just like collapsed, obviously, with COVID. And then I think that also really changed our trajectory of the way we wrote about music. I think before it was quite carefree and a bit sort of like a bit punky, a bit spiky, and then we suddenly were forced to become much more introspective and also deal with a lot of stuff that maybe we could just kind of glaze over when you're living the life of a young guy, you know, always keeping busy, not really kind of looking at these facets of yourself, and then suddenly really having to confront those things. I think that all really informed these tracks, and I think that's what also gives it a more depth, and why I'm more proud of this than, I mean, I like also our old songs, but I think these ones are a bit more mature and a bit more artistic, I would say.
Cool. Is there, when you're writing for an album, or like in that kind of album mode, I feel like there's a pressure or a want to try to keep it kind of concise, and like, this is the energy we're going for. Is there anything moving on to the next thing on the musical side that you're looking forward to being able to explore?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all at such different stages of our lives now. I think because there was so much happening sort of internally, then this record is quite an introspective one. And I think now maybe that we're all, we've weathered that storm a bit, and we're all stronger and better for it. I think it'd be nice to like be more extrospective and looking more at what's happening around us. Like, there's so much to talk about here in Berlin. There's been so much change since even the short time I've lived here, like 6 years, and like the world as well. It would be interesting to like have less navel gazing and more.
Do you feel like personally you would prefer to lean like into like a political side of things, or like a social, more personal side of things, or social society? What is more interesting to you?
I mean, I'm really interested in politics and anthropology, but again, I'm 1/4 of the band, and that's kind of the great thing I like about it is you pull it in one direction, but they're also all pulling in what's interesting them at the moment. So we haven't really we never really discuss what we want to do with the writing process. I think we just throw in ideas and we push and pull and push and pull. So I'm interested to go into that process again heavily, and because I'm always so surprised and pleasantly surprised, I should say, about how my ideas I bring into it clash with theirs and get distorted and turn into something new, sort of like dialectical. And I think that's why I like being in a band, and I think bands are so cool because that abstraction that comes from multiple people writing music is, I find really interesting. I mean, the purity of a solo songwriter writing music is also great. But I do love that when you hear all of this sort of conflict and different ideas all going into the same song or same album.
Do you see that reflected in any specific bands you can think of, where you're like, oh, I can almost see the behind the scenes of ideas forming?
I mean, yeah, I think a lot of my favorite bands have these sort of like artistic conflicts in them somehow, like the Smiths are such an interesting example of like Johnny Marr writing all of this really quite optimistic, uplifting music, and then Stephen Morrissey, the lyricist of the Smiths, just writing such morbid, like depressing lyrics, and that makes it like so great. I mean, also so many famous bands, like the Beatles as well. John and Paul are like such polar opposites. I think they were at their best when they were being forced to write songs together, not writing like one album of John songs and one album of Paul songs. Also, I find that really interesting in bands, or also all bands when they're all like just cooking at the same time. Like, that's the thing I loved about jazz when I was getting into it. Like John Coltrane Quartet or something like that. They're all just playing at the like top of their game. And interweaving and supporting each other, pulling back and pulling forward, and I find that so exciting about music. These groups of people creating this one voice. That I think sometimes can speak more than like words alone.
A large part of that as well is like the live performance interaction, where it's obviously a lot of it's written and structured off stage, and then coming on stage is more of like conversation happening. Is that something you would be interested in getting into with Usual Boys or with a different project or anything like that? Where you're like having the structure on stage is really comforting, at least for me.
Mm-hmm.
But then having more of that live performance and writing combination, is that something that you
sort of like improvisation? Yeah. I mean, I think there's with this band. We don't do too much improvisation, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
It's all quite thought out. Just because I think one thing we're always trying to do is have quite a captivating show.
Yeah.
From start to finish. And I think that's something that I always respond to well. Because I think if you want to improvise, that's an art form in itself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think so many people kid themselves about how good they are improvising.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing worse than going to a show, an improvised show, and it's just crap because they're not great improvisers.
Mm-hmm.
I think, I really respond to improvised music.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's totally my craft.
I think it's also like it's entertaining in a different way, where if you go to like a Kendrick Lamar or like Beyonce style show where it's like super tied in and everything's super organized and on time and everything, it's entertaining for everyone. Like no one's watching that being like, oh, this is boring.
Yeah.
And then I went to a Thundercat show, and they were like jamming. There was like one song that just turned into like 15 minutes of jamming, and I was loving it. And the person I was with like wasn't a musician. It was just like went out for a cigarette. This is just boring. They're just making sounds. And I was like, it's crazy that they can do this. So it's kind of a different audience too as well, maybe.
Yeah, I think also I think I waver in between being like a music fan just for the sake of music or a music fan as a medium of like delivering ideas. And I think sometimes when I see that music for music's sake, I don't really respond to it that much.
Right.
But yeah, there's a time and a place for all of that as well.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting though that you're a guitarist with that perspective, because I feel like usually it's songwriters and vocalists that are like, oh, this is an expression of ideas, and then instrumentalists typically are more like into the sound and the music just for music. Yeah,
I mean, I think the guitar is like a sort of, I feel like it's a bit like painting. That you can be quite, there's levels of abstraction, because at the end of the day, a painting is not, if a painting of an apple is still not an apple, it's still, just like layers of color. And you can pull that from being quite literal and speaking a very sort of like literal musical language, or going all the way to really abstract Rothko paintings or Pollock paintings that are more about feeling and energy. And I feel that with the guitar, what I like about it maybe is you don't need to be as succinct or literal as a lyricist when having an idea, because they're literally telling you it in language. I mean, obviously there's levels of abstraction with language and poetry, but with the guitar I can in my mind feel like I'm saying something and put that into how I play, and then the person on the other end can totally take from it what they want. And I think that's also cool. And maybe allows me to really get out what I want to get out and not alienate people.
Has there been a change since you started with the Usual Boys in the way that you write guitar, in the way that you kind of approach it from a, I don't know if holistics, I don't know what that word means, but I think it's the right word for this, like from a standpoint of looking at it as a process?
Well, I mean, I think with guitar playing, what I always try and do is try and write stuff that I think has some sort of lyrical quality, singing, like something you could sing. And I can't remember, it was some interview with, I think also like it was Johnny Margan, really good guitarist. And he was talking about that riff, the Kinks riff, I want to be with you all day and all of the night. I think do 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 do. And he was kind of saying, it feels like that. How could you write something so simple, that feels like it's been around forever? That must have been around forever. I think that's always something that I aspire to, is write riffs and licks that feel like they've been around forever, because they're simple and
singable.
Singable.
Yeah.
I find that like interesting because I'm just a big fan of a riff.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like when I was a kid and you just hear there's certain riffs that you just think, wow, that's class. Like that gets me. You know, like, I would just love that.
Yeah, and there's ones that, I mean, even with that one where it's like when you say the name of the song, it's it's the like that comes to mind. Or there's bands like Fratelli's that are almost, you like can't take it away from the like Chelsea Dagger guitar riff, and like there's something so powerful to that. And the same with even like Backstreet Boys with the Tell Me Why, which makes like Tell Me Why like makes the whole song doesn't make any sense, but it's just so singable and so like ingrained in your brain, even if you've heard it like not so many times.
I think as well, I also try and do with the guitar. I don't know to what extent successfully, but I'm a big fan as well. Saxophonist John Coltrane, because he has this like range, or you know, on one side, he can be so ferocious and technical. You know, like his latter work, but also so sweet and like ballad, like tracks like My One and Only Love and Lush Life. It's so like he was a very like calm, pious man who had a family and lived in suburbia, and you could just feel like that allowed him to have this like incredible artistic depth where he could be like at some points like almost like satanic rage, and at other points like so harmonious and beautiful. And I aspire to have that on the instrument. Yeah, I think that's going to be a lifelong quest of trying to. I mean, and also he's like one of the best musicians of all time. Like, in no way would I ever compare myself to him, but
an aspiration.
Yeah, sure. It's good to have aspirations, right? And you might as well aspire to be like the best. But yeah, I wish that sometimes as well, because I think if I'm gonna be a truly good musician, there's so many facets to my life, more than just being rock and roll. You know, it's really also, I think, nice with the guitar. The guitar can be such a bell like really beautiful lush sound. And I think what I also want to do with this band is have the confidence to also have more of that side of my playing, and not so much just heavy angular playing.
Cool. Well, we've done about 45 minutes. Do you guys have any questions? If you want, you don't have to.
It's been such a fun conversation to listen to.
Thank you.
Like, touched on a lot of stuff.
Cool. Yeah. Then I think we can finish up.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Thanks for coming along. The album out in April. One more single this year. One single out already.
Yeah. Two from the album, actually. We had French Cops in June, and then this I Want What You Have in September.
Cool.
And yeah, keep your eyes peeled for the finals. Yeah. We're going to try and make that happen.
Nice. And thanks everyone for listening. Thanks to Podfest for organizing this. If you can leave a 5-star review, that's always really appreciated, or subscription, and go check out the usual place. Thank you.